Hello and good morning. Welcome back to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. For this upload, we will be reading Judges chapter 8. And the men of Ephraim said unto him, Why hast thou served us thus, that thou calledst us not when thou wentest to fight with the Midianites? And they did chide with him sharply. And he said unto them, What have I done now in comparison of you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God hath delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb, and Zeb. And what was I able to do in comparison to you? Then their anger was abated toward him when he had said that. And Gideon came to Jordan and passed over, he and the 300 men that were with him, faint yet pursuing them. And he said unto the men of Succoth, Give, I pray you, loaves of bread unto the people that follow me, for they be faint, and I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. And the princes of Succoth said, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hand, that we should give bread unto thine enemy? And Gideon said, Therefore, when the Lord hath delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into mine hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with the briars. And he went up thence to Penuel, and spake unto them likewise. And the men of Penuel answered him, as the men of Succoth had answered him. And he spake also unto the men of Penuel, saying, When I come again in peace, I will break down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkar, and their hosts with them, about 15,000 men. All that were left of all the hosts of the children of the east, for there fell 120,000 men that drew sword. And Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents on the east of Nobah and Jogbeah, and smote the host, for the host was secure. And when Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued after them, and took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and discomfited all the host. And Gideon the son of Joash returned from battle before the sun was up, and called a young man of the men of Succoth, and inquired of him, and described unto him the princes of Succoth and the elders thereof, even 17 men. And he came unto the men of Succoth, and said, Behold Zebah and Zalmunna, with whom ye did upbraid me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thine hand, that we should give bread unto thy men that are weary? And he took the elders of the city, and thorns of the wilderness, and briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. And he beat down the tower of Penuel, and slew the men of that city. Then he said unto Zebah and Zalmunna, What manner of men were they whom ye slew at Tabor? And they answered, As thou art, so were they. Each one resembled the children of a king. And he said, They were my brethren, even the sons of my mother. As the Lord liveth, if ye had served them alive, I would not slay you. And he said unto Jether his firstborn, Up and slay them. But the youth drew not his sword, for he feared, because he was yet a youth. Then Zebah and Zalmunna said, Rise thou, and fall upon us, for as the man is, so is his strength. And Gideon arose, and slew Zebah and Zalmunna, and took away the ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, Rule thou over us, both thou, and thy son, and thy son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. And Gideon said unto them, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. And Gideon said unto them, I would desire a request of you, that ye would give me every man the earrings of his prey, for they had golden earrings, because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, We will willingly give them. And they spread a garment, and did cast therein every man the earrings of his prey. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside ornaments, and collars, and purple raiment that was on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that were about their camels' necks. Chain snatching, the first instance. And Gideon made an ephod thereof, and put it in his city, even in Ophrah. And all Israel went thither a whoring after it, which thing became a snare unto Gideon and to his house. Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more, and the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon. And Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon had 60 sons of his body begotten, for he had many wives. And his concubine that was in Shechem, she also bare him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. And Gideon the son of Joash died in a good old age, and was buried in the sepulchre of Joash's father in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again, and went a whoring after Baalim, and made Baal-berith their god. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of all their enemies on every side, neither shewed any kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, namely Gideon, according to all the goodness which he had shewed unto Israel. So, summarizing Judges chapter 8. In verses 1 through 8, okay, so at the end of chapter 7, Gideon leads a successful campaign. I guess that's not the right way to say that. I don't know why I keep trying to say he leads a successful something. He leads 300 men in battle against the enemy, who were countless. There were so many of them. And Gideon and his army is successful over the enemy. At the end of chapter 7, he calls, or he sends messengers to call the tribe of Ephraim, and Ephraim meets uh, the enemy because the enemy begins to flee. And they flee to these two bodies of water, Jordan and another name for a body of water. So Ephraim meets these men, the enemy, and brings the heads of two of the Midianite princes to Gideon to show them that, yes, we conquered the enemy. So after that, now we have Judges chapter 8 that's starting. And the men of Ephraim that brought the heads to Gideon, they say to him, why didn't you call us when there was an issue initially? So Ephraim was angry. Gideon tells them, okay, let me just start over. Ephraim was angry that Gideon did not call them for help earlier, but he quells their sentiment by pointing out the fact that they were able to do something that he was not able to do, which is bringing back the heads of two of those princes. So then their anger was abated. In verse 4, Gideon and the 300 were continuing to pursue the enemy in this chapter and arrived at a place called Succoth. He asked the men of Succoth for some bread for his 300 men and told them what he was doing, that he was pursuing the Midianites. And then they asked in a mocking tone. They were mocking him. Are the hands already? Are the hands of? Are the heads? So I read this from the King James the first time. So are the hands? Okay, so it does say are the hands. I thought it said are the heads. So in verse 5, he's telling these people, hey, please give me some bread. I'm exhausted. I'm pursuing these kings. And so they sarcastically respond, oh, or have you already been victorious that we should give you some bread? So they're playing with him. They're not going to give him any bread. Even though he told them what he's doing, he was honest. And he said, all right, when I am victorious, I will beat you with the thorns of the wilderness. Because you're not you and you're hangry. So then he went to another place called Penuel, and he spoke to them in the same way and explained to them, hey, I'm pursuing the kings of Midian. Can you give me some bread? I'm hungry. And they did the same thing. They answered him the same way, sarcastically. Basically, no, we're not giving you any food. So Gideon responds, when I come again, after I'm victorious, I'm going to destroy your territory for not giving me any bread. Verse 10, Zebah and Zalmunna, the two Midianite kings, were in Karkor with 15,000 men. And it says that was all the people that were left were 15,000 against Gideon's 300, and they were fleeing from Gideon and his 300. Also says that 120,000 men died. So that was for 300 of Gideon's men, 120,000 died, and 15,000 were fleeing. Verse 11 through 13, Gideon defeated the enemy, caught the two kings, and returned from battle before sunrise. Verse 14, he then captured a man of Succoth, the first city that he went and asked for bread from, and questioned him. found out who his leaders were, asked for 77 men. Once he found who these men were, he reminded them that they taunted him and wouldn't give him any bread. And so then he said, "Behold, these two Midianite kings." He took the elders of the city and he took the thorns of the wilderness and taught the men of Succoth a lesson. What other? It taught them in a lesson, punishing them with desert thorns, disciplined the men of Succoth. I mean, just disrespectful. Doesn't even say he killed them, he just said that he beat them, taught them a lesson. Then in verse 17, Penuel, the second city who was sarcastic with him, wouldn't give him any food, he goes there and he destroys the tower and kills their men. So, verse 18 through 21, Gideon asks these two kings, Zeba and Zalmunna, what happened to the men? Or where are the men? And they respond, as you are, so are they. Each of them resembled a king. Gideon tells them that those were his relatives, those men at Tabor. He tells his son Jether to kill the kings. And in verse 20, he was a young man. He was, he wasn't seasoned. He didn't have the heart to kill him. So Gideon kills them himself. And Gideon takes the ornaments from the necks of the camels. This is the first chain snatching, okay, because we get to verse 26. Besides the crescent ornaments and the collars that were worn around the necks, the collars are the chains, okay, chains on the camel's necks. So this is the first chain snatching. So Gideon was the first one to be disrespectful, okay? That's the first. Chain snatching as a sign of disrespect is actually a biblical practice, as we saw in the previous chapter, also having a call, a sound, a horn to let people know it's time to assemble for battle. That is also biblical practice. Checking in when you're going to a new territory, that is also a biblical practice. So if you see this behavior resurfacing in a certain community, in a certain subculture, just understand it comes from somewhere. Even when we look at the story of Deborah, creating a song after your war victory, going to battle, being victorious, and singing about the dead ops, that is a biblical practice. So, I mean, we just pay attention to those similarities. So, okay. Gideon kills the two kings. He takes the chains off of the necks of the camels. Disrespect. Then we get to verses 22 through 28. Israel requests that Midian and his sons, grandsons, becomes their next leader. And Gideon says, no, God will lead you. Gideon gathers 43 pounds of gold, makes an ephod, and an ephod, okay, instrument of priestly divination. It's like a type of what is it called? Some type of something you could wear that's supposed to be priestly. So he melts this gold down and he creates a sacred garment. That's what I should have said. Sacred garment. This item was in display in his city. Israel then began to worship the item, which became a snare or a trap for Gideon and his family. Because of Gideon's accomplishments, his success in war, Midian was subdued and they raised their heads no more. They even lost their pride because of the disrespect. So Israel experienced 40 years of peace. Then we get to verses 29 through 32. The Bible calls Gideon Jerubbaal. That's Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, Again, it's referring to Gideon in chapter 6. His father called him Jerubbaal in chapter 6. So that's why we're still seeing that again. Jerubbaal and Gideon is the same person. I was going to say something else, but I'm not going to. So the Bible calls him Jerubbaal, says he lived in his own house and had many wives and 70 sons. He had a concubine in Shechem. Shechem is one of the refuge cities. He She birthed a son named Abimelech. Verse 32, Gideon died and was buried on his father's property in Ophrah. Then we get to verses 33 through 35. As soon as Gideon dies, Israel returns to idol worship and did not honor or show kindness to Gideon's household in return for all the good deeds that he did. So there's just a couple of highlights that I'd like to point out. First, just observing and just giving some attention to Gideon's character development. In Judges chapter 6, verse 15, when God tells him he's going to be the one to deliver Israel, his response is self-doubt. So he goes from saying he's the least of his family, he's poor, to now leading a successful attack with only 300 men in chapter 7. And then now in chapter 8, he's snatching chains and beating people for not giving him food. The second thing, verses 6 through 8. Gideon asked for food and was mocked twice. He stated his honest need, and he was vulnerable enough to tell these people that, yes, I am doing something right now. I'm trying to accomplish this goal, and I really need help. And 2 different times, he was mocked and not helped. Just wanting to point that out. Sometimes that's the response to honesty and being vulnerable. That's why how I operate, I'm not vulnerable until I feel like I can handle whatever response is going to come back. Because sometimes it ain't what it should be, even if you're honest and it's coming from the right place. So just something to pay attention to. And then the last thing, Israel forgot Gideon's achievements and did not honor him once he died. So that's some of what the Bible, or not some, all of what the Bible is portraying is human nature. That's why it's so important to know who's talking and the context of these verses, because this is portraying human nature. It is like humans to forget the good deeds once you're gone. So thank you so much for clicking on the video. That is all we have for Judges chapter 8. Judges is only 21 chapters? Yes, 21 chapters. So we are moving right along. I love you. Have a wonderful day and happy Thanksgiving.